People with knowledge of Seattle music history might know of the Farts. That's F-A-R-T-Z. It's a punk band from 1980 and 1981. They had previously been called the Anti-Toxins. They released a 9-song, 7-inch 45 called Because the Fucking World Stinks. And later a 16-song opus called World Full of Hate, the first full-length LP by a Seattle hard punk band, released through Dead Kennedy's Alternative Tentacles Records. And a member of the Farts for a time was none other than Tom Hansen. And Tom wrote a book called American Junkie. It's an autobiography about his drug use and recovery. He's a really good writer. It's a great book. The genre of recovery books is vast, and 99.9% of them are shit. I think if it's part of a 12-step program, they force you to write a confessional thing, and that's why that genre is so bad. But boy, Tom is a really good writer. And it's, you can't fake good writing and you can't fake life experience. And, this innate honesty that he has, like, he's very believable, and his worldview, very nihilistic, but, antisocial, anti-establishment. I love it. So this is Doomed Planet, the podcast, episode 24, Notorious Seattle Junkies, Tom Hansen. On the Amazon listing, it says, Tom Hansen takes us nonstop into a land of desperate addicts, failed punk bands, and brushes with sad fame, selling drugs during the Seattle grunge years. Well, fine. They wanted to have the Seattle angle and the grunge angle, and we'll get to those brief scenes in the book with Lane Staley and Kurt Cobain, two of the people from that era that did not survive their heroin addiction. So we will go through American Junkie and pick out some of the highlights for you, and then we'll see what old Tom Hansen is up to these days, mostly by looking at his Facebook. He also got back to us, so we asked him a couple questions. American Junkie was first released in 2010, and then the Soft Skull Press edition came out in 2017. The foreword is by Sean Baudon. He's a Seattle writer. He talks about, we've always been doing drugs and getting high. The Sumerians were brewing beer thousands of years ago. Motley Crue shot up Jack Daniels intravenously. Great quote, booze can make you giddy or furious. Weed full of creative notions or dumb epiphanies. Coke an unwarranted sense of self-worth. But only heroin can give you nothing. In the preface, Tom says that this is a work of nonfiction, and he does his best to convince us that he's trying to recreate events as best he can with his own knowledge and the help of eyewitnesses at the time, and he does a great job of it. It really rings authentic, the book. Nothing has been made up. Medical records have been inserted to document the extent of my addiction and subsequent damage to my body. There's also news clippings, including one of his birth dad, who was a famous artist, and we'll get to him. The narrative structure of the book is Tom in recovery in his hospital bed, in his bed at the Bailey Boucher house, which started out as an AIDS hospice, and then when they found some drugs that helped AIDS patients live somewhat normal lives and not just die off like they were in the late 80s, early 90s, they started taking patients in with other troubles to fix them, and they fixed Tom. And he's very lucky to have ended up at Bailey Boucher, which is well-renowned and sort of fancy place to go if you're sick. And the first graphic is his medical chart for when he was admitted. He's in Harborview Medical Center before going to Bailey Boucher. He's got dead tissue. He's got a hole on either side of his buttocks that is infected, and it's a little diagram where the doctor is sketching that out on a human form. It's pretty damn gruesome. And again, I'm going to lend this book to my 14-year-old who's watched every single Vice magazine special about various drugs. This is going to be his Say No to Drugs book. If he reads this, I think he already knows because I told him heroin horror stories of Seattle, many of them that I know of or witnessed firsthand. I think he knows better, but yeah, you're going to read American Junkie, son, and never shoot up drugs. But humans are survivors, and for every 100 people who OD'd on heroin, you have a Tom Hansen. He's a tough bastard. He is a badass. Photos of him now, he does look older than his years. You can see if he wears a short sleeve t-shirt, there's like parts of his arms are missing. Some of the muscles had to be taken out, but he's still with us. I think his only vice now is smoking cigarettes. I did ask him if he's on methadone or Suboxone or something. He didn't get back to me on that question, but again, he's alive and doing well. Tom is in his apartment. He's been using and selling heroin for a dozen years, and now he hasn't left his room in months. He has his assistant go make the heroin deliveries, and he hasn't gotten out of bed in weeks. Everything you need is right here, within reach. The pink plastic bubble tape chewing gum box full of heroin, a beeper and phone, a glass of water, a burnt spoon and a plastic gram scale, a Zippo lighter, John F. Kennedy's face engraved on it, some cigarettes, Camel filters, hardpack, a roll of paper towels, 100 box of brand new syringes, 10 packs of 10 in plastic bags, and a big bottle of antibiotics, 500 milligram capsules of Keflex, to fix all the other fixes. At the foot of the bed is a big screen TV. It's been on all night. It's on all night every night. The bubble tape box looks like a chewing tobacco tin. You pop the lid, remove a 25-gram chunk of black tar heroin, eyeball 2 grams, split both, drop a half gram into the spoon and add some water. You hold the Zippo under the spoon. There's that steam, that smell, like burning tires and vinegar twisting your spine. Carefully, you set the spoon down on the soot-stained carpet. Drop in a piece of cotton rolled from a torn-up cigarette filter. You place the needle against the cotton and fill the syringe as full as you can, then set it aside. With your teeth, you tear open a 10-pack of new syringes. You remove 3 more and fill them as well, drawing the plungers back as far as possible. It used to be so easy, bulging veins all over your arms. Pipes. You didn't even have to tie off. Just a little prick and it was there in a flash. There was no waiting. It's not like that anymore. It's not like anything anymore. And here's where it gets gruesome. By the way, there's countless descriptions of people shooting up in pop culture. That was a damn good one. From the hole in the side of your butt, you remove a wad of paper towels, soggy and limp, yellowish brown in places, about the size of a grapefruit. You toss it out into the center of the room with the others. You run your finger around the lip of the wound, then inside, pushing here and there. Almost too gruesome to read on, but the end result of his addiction, it was a good ride, and now he's in this shitty apartment surrounded by needles. There's a big pile of pus-filled paper towels on the floor for where he's dressing his wounds. There was a drug scare film that Gen Xers like myself were forced to watch called Dead is Dead. They showed they did fictionalized recreations of drug overdoses and stuff, but the one thing that stood out to us kids was the shot of someone, they had a hole in their leg and they were just dumping the drugs in, and I thought, that's nonsense. Who would do that? That's just a drug scare film tactic. But no, that's you know, if you're really that bad off, if you're really that strung out, eventually you're going to be dumping drugs into an open wound. So that's a warning, kids. And he says the heroin doesn't do what it used to do, but it still does something. And, you know, there's that myth that, you can increase your tolerance, but there's that myth that, you're never going to get high after a while when you're strung out. But the truth is you will. And not only that, but if you're a sufferer of pain, you will know that pain relief is a high unto itself. So imagine that you are withdrawing from opiates. You're going to be in serious pain and suffering. It's going to be a horror mentally and physically. And then, boom, you shoot up, and you're not going to be blasted, but you're going to feel that immediate relief. And that, again, is the best high that there is. Hello, this is your host of the Doom Planet podcast, Alex. This is a disclaimer. I only once drank opium tea, and I've never used needle drugs. If I had read this book as a child, that would still be the case, only more so. Tom goes back to his childhood because he writes so beautifully. It's interesting to hear stories. His parents are from Norway, and they got married after World War II and moved to the Seattle area in 1957. And again, these are his adoptive parents. His dad was a fisherman. He had a drinking problem like many fishermen, but he was not abusive toward his wife or kid. And he died when Tom was 16 in a fishing accident. Okay, jumping back and forth, now we're back to Junkie Tom. It's May 26th, 1999, and Tom is calling 911 because he realizes he's about to die and he finally needs to go to the hospital. For a moment, you don't know what to say. Where would you even begin? But then it breaks again, a jumble of words spilling out. The heroin, the syringes, the smell, the holes. You've been waiting for them to get smaller, but they just keep getting bigger. She asks for your address, you give it, and she tells you someone will come soon. And then she suddenly hangs up. Then we jump back to his idyllic childhood in Edmonds, Washington, a beautiful town north of Seattle. It's his birthday, and they're having Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's a good idea to put these medical records in the book. Very grim. 5/27/1999. 37-year-old white male. Admitting reason. Admitted to MCU for 8 hip abscesses, RQ endocarditis, anemia, dehydration, malnutrition. Substance abuse. Patient is a current 8 to 10 gram IV heroin user via skin popping any available fleshy areas. He received methadone last night. Patient is a 2 ppd smoker for 15 years. So 2 packs per day of the Camel hard pack. And so Tom comes very close to getting his leg amputated, and miraculously he heals up eventually, and the decision was made to not amputate, and it was the right decision. I know that if Tom has mentioned on Facebook he's got some health problems related to some of the damage he did, but again, he's alive, and that's what counts. Just don't cut off my cock. That was the one place I never shot up, Tom writes. And again, the Doom Planet podcast has an explicit warning. This is not for the squeamish. Seattle true crime is not often pretty. And again, drugs should be legal. Tom's only crime was, providing people with heroin. As a heroin dealer, it's illegal, but, there are worse criminals out there. We're going to have to amputate your leg, a nurse says at one point. Your hip is infected down in the bone. You have extensive destruction of your pelvic girdle. The top of your leg bone, the part with the knob on it, has, sort of melted away from the infection. The socket, too. May 27th, 1999. Met with the patient to discuss upcoming surgery. Doctor explained the abscesses are quite severe, down to the bone at points, and that he has a large-scale infection throughout his lower body. Doctor explained that he's recommending a surgery to try to correct this problem. He explained that the surgery would begin with thoroughly cleaning the wounds under anesthesia and may include removing tissue from other parts of the body to cover the abscesses. He also explained that once surgeons can assess the patient's status, the patient's condition may necessitate amputation. He explained that potential risks of the surgery include a heart attack, a stroke, death, or amputation. He clarified that the patient may need further surgeries to improve his condition. Doctor also met with the patient's mother independently. She's a 77-year-old woman of Norwegian descent who speaks English as a second language. Her English comprehension and communication is excellent. So they are weaning Tom off of his heroin addiction by giving him methadone. First 80 milligrams 4 times a day, then 90, then 360, and which is a lot. How did they figure 360 milligrams? He asks the pretty blue-eyed blonde nurse named Gretchen. I think it was the screaming, she said. In post-op, that's what I heard. Screaming. You woke up from the operation much earlier than you were supposed to. The doctors hadn't even finished. You're in the intensive care unit. In 1974, Tom spends the summer in Norway with his aunt and uncle, and that's a great thing, great life experience to be a youngster hanging out in Norway doing manual labor on a farm, getting a different perspective. And of course the pain team comes in and they set Tom up with a morphine pump. So like any kid in 1976, Tom is a skateboarder, and he and his skateboarding crew break into the state capitol in Olympia and do some minor vandalism, and Tom urinates off of a balcony. So it's kind of like, here comes the punk rock Tom, the punk rock phase of his life. Then jump back ahead, and that nice nurse, Gretchen, is giving Tom a fentanyl sucker. It's a lollipop with fentanyl in it. Why? They're going to start changing his dressing, and that's going to be extremely painful. Tom describes that when they change his dressing, it feels like he's being skinned alive, despite the fentanyl sucker. And then back to a painful moment from childhood. His dad is in the Gulf of Alaska on a fishing boat, and a hole opens up in the ship. The captain orders them to abandon ship, and everyone gets in their survival suits except for Tom's dad. Quote, he said he'd had enough, that he just couldn't do it again. The captain eventually talked him into getting into the life raft, and they drifted for a day. And then there was some problem with the life raft. Everyone had to get out while they repaired it. When they were climbing back in, my dad keeled over, dead. So they tied him to a rope and they towed him with the life raft, but eventually they just had to cut him loose and his body was never found. And like any decent artist, Tom gets in trouble at school and dislikes school and it can't capture his imagination or his attention. And back to the hospital bed. And guess what? Tom is HIV negative. Quote, when I first started shooting up, syringes were hard to come by, and I'd shared needles with anyone. But for the last 12 years or so, I'd always had boxes of new ones from the needle exchange. If I'd gotten AIDS, it would have showed up a long time ago, most likely. So he lucks out here. And then Tom is moved to the Bailey Boucher house. Bailey Boucher was started in 1992. It's an inpatient long-term care facility. It was named after Thatcher Bailey. He was a Seattle publisher and a founding donor. His partner, Frank Boucher, died of AIDS in 1989. And there used to be a well-respected bookstore on Broadway in Seattle called Bailey Coy Books. I believe that was Bailey's sister that ran that. And again, AIDS is no longer a death sentence. So currently Bailey Boucher, it's a 35-bed inpatient program. They treat people with other horrible end-of-life-ending diseases like ALS and Huntington's disease. And again, it's a really nice place. Beautiful building on Madison and 29th or something like that, right? As you go into the Madison Park, the upscale Madison Park neighborhood. And Tom describes at one point that there is a balcony not facing Madison, but facing north. There he would have a smoke, and there's peace and quiet and tranquility there on that balcony. And this is where we learn that his 77-year-old mother is still working at Albertsons. It's a supermarket. She's giving out samples of cocktail weenies or something. Tom is thinking, boy, if she stayed in Norway, she'd be able to enjoy her golden years. And yeah, that's how sick fucking American society is. You have people in their 70s still working at these shitty jobs. It's a crime. You got a guy who's 75 years old working as a greeter at Walmart. It's wrong. So Tom gets to Bailey Boucher and he sees his room and how nice the place is. Again, another lucky break for Tom here in his recovery. Quote, what the hell was going on? I had expected to end up in some shitty old folks' home that smelled of piss, or some nut house full of babbling psychos, drooling maniacs, gacked out on brain pills, twitching. I was fairly sure that my survival so far had just been a fluke and a strange twist of fate, and that eventually I would have to suffer the punishment for the ultimate sin of destroying my body. I closed my eyes, waited, and then opened them, and I was still there. Lucky, Tom, you're one lucky fucker. Right, more childhood shit. Tom gets a job at a Chinese restaurant, and then he realizes that the waiters there's no upward mobility. Duh, it's a restaurant. And all the waiters are Chinese, and he'll never get to be a waiter, so he doesn't last long at that job. So at Bailey Boucher, Tom meets Greg. That's going to be his kind of guardian angel nurse that's going to help him out. And another nurse asks him what his immediate goals are, and he says, I want to go have a cigarette. And he's surprised that they're not all scoldy with him about that. And they're like, all right, let's work together to make that happen. Okay, Tom as a teen is expanding his horizons. He's leaving the sleepy suburb of Edmonds and driving into Seattle to go to bars. And he says he's hanging out at Il Bistro. That's the legendary Italian place at the Pike Place Market. Maybe it was seedier back then. I imagine that it was. Then he wanders into the showbox, and soon enough, he's in a punk rock band. We called ourselves the Farts and wrote 1-minute songs that railed about the government, religion, war, the pretentiousness of art, and stupidity in general. And schizo, jumping back to Tom in recovery, I noticed that they're giving him a nicotine patch. It's well known that in the psych ward, if you give a nicotine patch to some of these patients, it calms them right down. And Tom is in a psych ward in a way. And I wonder, while he was in recovery, was he thinking about writing a book? And there's no mention of him, writing stuff before this. He was a heroin addict, not really a writer, but he's a smart guy, and I bet he was a reader, at least at some point in his life.
And, somebody along the line said you should go back to school. Mm-hmm. And so I did, and ended up in a writing course somehow. And somebody said, you're pretty good at this writing thing.
Yeah.
And I got a master's degree in creative writing and wrote a couple of books, and that's where I'm at now.
So his band is back to the punk rock days. His band is playing at Tugs, a well-known gay bar, and Tom is playing pinball, and some guy comes behind him and grabs him and tries to hump him, and he's like, "Oh, I'm straight," and that's the scenario. And Tom eventually leaves the farts. The punk thing in Seattle had reached its zenith, it seemed, he says. It had started to split into these factions, and the unity of the scene had vanished. Now the punks hated the new wavers, the skinheads hated everyone. The heavy metal crowd hated the punks, and on and on. It was silly, but I still wanted to play. Tom's a guitar player, by the way. So he ends up in another legendary Seattle punk band, the Refusers. And before I forget, Guns N' Roses dude Duff McKagan was also a member of the Farts. And we're going to do an episode about Duff because as of late, he's been saying to the media that Seattle is the only city that he's been to where he carries a knife when he's downtown because of his fear of the horrible crime of Seattle. So he's got some right-wing tendencies that we're going to explore. But anyway, back to Tom. So the Refusers have a song called Splat Goes the Cat. Tom finds a dead cat on Capitol Hill before a show, and they end up throwing the dead cat into the audience while playing that song. And there's a newspaper clipping, "Punk group swings dead cat on stage." And if you see Tom's Facebook, he has a love of cats, and he probably feels bad about the Splat the Cat incident in which his punk band desecrated the dead body of a calico kitty. Tom talks about the monastery. This was an old church that was managed by a pedophile somewhere off of Boren and Stewart. It was a nightclub and very underage, a lot of drugs and orgies. And this shit was happening. This is like 14 and 15-year-old kids come into this place. And again, this was the Seattle of the 70s and 80s, is the era of Streetwise. That documentary about homeless kids and some of whom had to resort to prostitution? That was the kind of city Seattle was. That was the kind of society that the people of Seattle allowed, is that you would have homeless teenagers prostituting themselves in downtown Seattle and then going to this nightclub at night run by a pedophile. The recovery genre often has a lot of sexual braggery. Tom's a good-looking guy. He's in a band. He has drugs, and he has some relationships with women, but there's not the bragging in this book, and that's a good thing. I think whoever helped him edit this book did a great job. And once the heroin starts happening for Tom, then he's involved with some women who are also strippers, heroin addicts / strippers, that is not unknown. And some of them are also prostituting themselves, selling their bodies to rich men. Then Tom meets his birth mom. She's a former beatnik and hippie and wild child. And then at first his biological mom claims that Tom's dad is a guy named James, who's a piano player, but it turns out that's a lie. Tom's dad is actually Jack Stangl, a well-known Seattle artist and raconteur who died of alcoholism at age 52. He was popular with wealthy people in Seattle that bought his work. He dropped out of Cornish College, went to Ballard High School, did some time in Japan studying art, an all-around 1950s Seattle beatnik guy. And apparently he had a loft in Pioneer Square, and admission to one of his parties would be a fifth of booze. Seattle is filled with artists who are fraudulent and do not have talent, but they have the chutzpah to present themselves as artists. And Jack Stangl, from the work that I can see, it's very beautiful. I don't see that he can draw hands or draw people. That's always my standard for, are you faking it or not? Can you draw hands? But he left his mark. And it's ironic, if Tom had inherited his biological father's alcoholism, he would be dead right now, because you drink that much, you're just going to die. But if you use heroin for a dozen years and then you stop, you can live. And your liver might even be fine. So his mom eventually starts sending him newspaper clippings about his dad, Jack Stangl, and his painting career, one from the Seattle Times after his death. Not an obituary, but an acknowledgement of his life and work, and an announcement that there would be a posthumous show of his art at Foster White Gallery. According to the Times, there's a romantic old notion that serious artists set themselves to self-destruct. When it happens, poverty, disillusion, and hard drinking most often are the prime destroyers. And there's a copy of the obituary. Jack Stangl, flamboyant person, gifted artist. But yeah, Tom is not an alcohol enthusiast. He's waxing nostalgic about, first he's taking Percodans and Percocets as a young punk rocker.
The opiate pills was like, that feels good.
Then he goes to the doctor and pretends that he has a migraine, and the doctor gives him a shot of Demerol, and he's on his way to addiction. Then he's back at his hospital bed, and there's a TV, and he's squirreling away methadone this whole time. They're giving him several pills, and he always takes one of them and sets it aside. And by the end of his stay at the Bailey Boucher house, he has a nice methadone stash that he eventually sells for thousands of dollars. Tom is no dummy. He's actually a pretty good businessman. He's claiming at one point he's making $1,000 a day selling heroin. But that's, cash in, cash out. It doesn't look like he ever saved any money from the heroin days. But here he is in recovery, and he's stashing away some methadone. Davy Jones of the Monkees was on TV, was trying to sell 60s CD compilations for Time Life. What a tragedy, I thought. Rock star reduced to corporate prostitute. This is the only error I found in the entire book. He describes Lakeview Cemetery, that's where Bruce Lee is buried and so forth, as the Capitol Hill Cemetery. Jimi Hendrix is buried up there, someone said, but of course Jimi is buried in Renton, Washington. And his simple grave was replaced by this giant monument recently. It's sort of a gaudy tourist trap in a way. It's bizarre, but we'll do that on our Jimi and family episode. So by 1985, Tom is going on coke binges and shooting up. And again, this lasts until 1999, when he's finally hospitalized. That is a good run.
Anybody that's shooting heroin or shooting coke or smoking crack or meth, I've never seen anybody say, gee, this is kind of unhealthy. I'm going to stop doing this and start juicing.
That whole black tar heroin thing, I mean, black tar heroin is sort of gross. I remember a drug aficionado, Jim Hogshire, at one point he went to New York City on a trip, and when he came back, he's like, oh, the China White, man, Alex, I'm telling you, this black tar stuff is nothing. You know, it has something to do with the Mexico to Seattle connection, and Tom says, there had always been Mexicans and Latinos selling drugs in Seattle, but the last few years it seemed like they were everywhere. There were places, 2nd and Pike downtown, but now there was also the Pike Place Market, which had turned into a sort of drug drive-through. All a person had to do was cruise through slowly and nod at the right person. They would hop in and that would be that. It was even easier than getting bananas, because that required stopping and getting out of your car. Dealers also hung out at the Victor Steinbrook Park at the end of the market, where one could walk into any number of bars in Belltown, Pioneer Square, the U District, or Lower Queen Anne, where dealers sold drugs openly. And that was partially the case in the early 90s. I think the Lava Lounge used to be called Hawaii West, and you could go in there and buy your smack, or at the Rendezvous, or at Sorry Charlie's, which was run by a fisherman and his Filipino wife, and of course the fisherman guy had a parrot. I'm sorry, that was My Susie's Oriental Pacific Cafe, not Sorry Charlie's. So this is an odd scene. Tom owes money to this drug dealer, and then he's like, all right, let me perform oral sex on you and I'll give you more heroin. And Tom is unable to achieve an erection, probably due to his heterosexuality and or the fact that he's already so strung out. He tried to arouse my cock with his mouth, but it was soft, like a big slug. Just realized that Tom's story of Tom as a musician, there are many stories like this. These people are in bands in Seattle and then they get strung out. And if they had only hung on for a few more years, they would have capitalized on the whole grunge hysteria thing where like every band imaginable was being signed to a major label. I'm thinking of The Accused, another band that could have achieved heavy metal superstardom, but they ended up, heroin. Whoops, oh well. So the executor of Tom's birth father's estate is giving away some of his paintings to area hospitals, and he's having an opening. So Tom goes to that, and he says, it was just like every other upper crust art party I'd ever been to, a bunch of pretentious flakes sipping wine and talking crap. There were lots of older fags and other assorted high society art types that looked like they had money, walking around with their noses in the air. So that's a little bit of lack of wokeness by Tom. But again, he's just being himself. It rings authentic that he would think that and then write about it unabashedly later. And so Tom graduates from user to dealer. And again, a lot of people caught up in the war on drugs and our carceral state are accused of being dealers, when in reality they are just selling enough to support their own habit. But Tom says, quote, I finally found something I was good at, something that paid well, that wasn't utter humiliation. I was finally fitting into the fabric of economic society, the so-called normal world, the world of winners and losers, buyers and sellers, the ones who have and the ones who don't. I was luckier than most, actually, because I liked my job. I was providing a product that people really needed, not something that they thought they needed because they'd been lied to a million times. There was no bullshit, no scam. Heroin didn't lie. It was just about the only thing that didn't. There was no marketing campaign, no advertising, no airbrushed photos, media spin, no crap about 4 out of 5 doctors recommending this or that brand or another. Tom is using his contacts in the very small Seattle music scene to get punk guys who had turned to drugs, a few of the early grunge guys, and some of their stripper girlfriends as customers. So one of his stripper girlfriends is making $700 or $900 a night, and he's wondering if she's doing more than stripping. And go back to hospitalized Tom. His mom, or his adoptive mom, really loves him, and she helps him get set up with a monthly disability check and a disabled parking permit. Once he gets discharged, he's going to be making appointments at the methadone clinic. But the drug dealer and addict Tom is more interesting. I don't know, he's being low-key. He's not being all flashy about being a drug dealer. He's just got a normal car and a beeper, and he drives around making deliveries. He tries to find customers that aren't totally desperate and that actually have maintained some kind of life or have some kind of income because it's just safer that way. And then Tom is in a band called Crisis Party. They have an album called Rude Awakening, and they have some kind of A&R girl, and they arrange a tour. And the tour was going to be 14 shows over 21 days. So he sets aside a month's worth of heroin to make the trip and arranges for his friend Katrina to take over his dealership. And then they're going to go on tour, and Tom realizes he's not stupid, that the tour, they keep canceling dates, and the tour is going to be a disaster, so Tom quits the band. So the band finds another guitarist. They end up playing only one show in LA for 5 people. So Tom's a full-on junkie, but says once or twice a year he feels the irresistible pull to shoot up cocaine. And he does mention that he sells heroin to a lady that ends up shooting up and ODing and dying. And, that's when you get clean and then you have that urge to just go back, then your tolerance is low. Everyone knows that. And so many people die because of that. It's like, don't plunge the whole fucking thing in your vein. Do a little skin popping. Make sure, do it a little at a time. Don't just go for it. It's suicidal, literally suicidal. So it starts to get grim, as it always does, bleak for these heroin addicts. Some biker guy comes over, and his boots crunching on the syringes sounded like someone walking on a gravel road. Speechless, he looked around the room again at the hundreds of used syringes and the bottles of piss. "What do you want?" I asked. 100, he replied. Yeah, this biker guy should have just turned around and left and said, wow, if this is what this leads to, I'm not doing this drug ever again. And here's the most realistic, the best line about heroin that I've ever heard coming from Tom. "You do it, you get strung out, it ruins your life, and you die." So eventually Tom runs out of veins, and he can't find a vein, so now he's going right into the flesh, into the muscle, not skin popping, shooting with the tip of the needle just under the skin, but deeper. It wasn't the same as hitting a vein, not by a long shot, but it did the trick. I felt it. And at this point, he describes picking a piece of bone out of one of his open wounds, and he dried out the piece of bone and made a necklace and wore it around his neck as a, quote, medal of honor, something I had picked up on the battlefield. All right, back to the Bailey Boucher house. He meets a young woman who only shot up a few times but caught AIDS. Yeah, at Bailey Boucher, he also meets people with inoperable brain tumors and just unlucky people. And Tom is the lucky one. And hey, if you're alive right now, walking around, you're luckier than many who are no longer with us. So Tom is going through physical therapy at Bailey Boucher, and he's finally able to take his wheelchair for a trip downtown. And he's thinking Second and Pike. Any good addict knows that Second and Pike has been and is now and always will be the most notorious drug corner in town, as Tom would say. But he resists the urge to go score. So Tom sells some heroin to Kurt Cobain and Kurt's friend Dylan Carlson. And Kurt gives him a backstage pass to the show, which is going to be MTV Live and Loud. I want to mention that Tom and I agree about the Seattle's Fremont neighborhood. Tom says, Fremont, a neighborhood of old hippies, nudist sun worshippers, and hemp-wearing weirdos. Then Tom goes to the Nirvana show and he realizes that once again, the music scene has changed. Suddenly, instead of 10 bands in town, there were 500. And instead of 2 clubs in town, there were 200. It made me feel a little old and out of place. And a few months after that show, Kurt would be dead.
I'm a tortilla, baby. I got cheese.
I got beans.
I got the little bit of meat and
Sour cream.
Tom reveals that his biological dad spent the last 10 years of his life, quote, on welfare, destitute, drunk, and alone. And people would come trying to buy his paintings, and he refused to sell anything during that time. And they ended up getting donated to hospitals. There's a chapter called Summer 1994. This is when Tom is busted by a whole bunch of cops, and we never hear the outcome of this. Digging around, I can't find any records in the public files. And so we don't know how Tom got out of this. Did he drop a dime on someone, or what happened there? I asked Tom through instant messaging, and he didn't reply to this particular question. But again, it's 1994, and Tom is going to go on for many more years as a dealer. So he got out of this. He was busted with a whole bunch of needles and holding a whole bunch of heroin, and I'm not sure he spent any time in jail. Oh, and he had guns in there too. Here's something that is not an original thought necessarily. He's talking about Seattle's iconic Space Needle. The needle. It's beautiful, I thought to myself. The world's biggest syringe. The little gold elevator was the plunger. And as it rose, it gave the sky the world's biggest shot of heroin. And again, when Tom is released from Bailey Boucher, he has 410 milligram methadone pills stashed away. And he says at $10 a pop on the street, they would net $4,000. And he gives them to his mom so she can stash them away. He also gave his mom cash over the years from his drug deals. And she didn't ask any questions. And what memoir of Seattle heroin addiction could be complete without a Lane Staley story? Lane of Alice in Chains fame, of course. Tom is selling him some heroin, and he goes to Lane's apartment, and it's basically an empty room with a couch in the middle. A collection of spoons, syringes, glass pipes, and plastic hoses were strewn around on smudged newspapers in front of the couch. The blinds were closed as usual, shutting out the light and with it the panoramic view of Puget Sound. At this point, Lane's really descending into the depths, and his girlfriend had just died of a heart infection, And Alice in Chains did go on one last tour opening for Kiss, which was kind of a disaster. So Lane is shooting up and also smoking crack. That was his MO. But again, Tom is cutting down on his customers to minimize the risk. And there's no better customer for a drug dealer than a rock star with a lot of money. And then Lane takes him on a wild motorcycle ride, and they stop at Bad Animals recording studio, which is no longer with us. That was across from the Two Bells Tavern on 4th Avenue, also no longer with us. And I believe that Ann and Nancy Wilson from the band Heart were investors in that studio. And Tom is wrapping up the book with another gruesome description about how bad his body had deteriorated. Soon it would be over. I had eliminated all my animal drives for food, for sex. My human traits, thinking and feeling, would soon be gone as well. I was not myself, not anyone or anything. I wasn't even a human being. I was just some faint electrical activity inside rotting flesh and bone, operating not even on instinct but just habit. This was Darwin's finest hour, just like they taught us in school. Natural selection was about to eliminate me from the gene pool. And Tom had never gotten sick up until the end. A lot of junkies, he says, are going to get necrotizing fasciitis or flesh-eating bacteria from dirty needles, but he never got sick until the end when he weighed barely 120 pounds and was near death. And, drugs should be legal, but Tom calculates 12 years times 15 heroin sales per day. That's 65,700 drug crimes. Then there's one final image from the Bailey Boucher house. Discharge record for Thomas Edward Hansen. October 29th, 1999. He's out of there. It's funny, there's in the form it says time of death / discharge, 1,600 hours. And in the acknowledgments, Tom thanks a lot of people, including Duff McKagan and Mark Lanigan of the Screaming Trees. Both of those guys had some serious addiction problems, and Mark has a new book out. By its very nature, it's going to be an addiction and recovery memoir, and also a rock star biography. Those are two of my favorite genres, as you know. So what's Tom up to now? We are going to find out. I asked him a few questions, and we're going to look at his Facebook. Tom has kind of the celebrity amount of friends on Facebook, 3,250. And when you do the math there, if he was going to spend 3 minutes deleting each of his friends, it would take him 166 hours to do so. So we will get to that right after this brief message.
And now, advertising from our sponsor.
Sharp blades plus gravity, that's the situation. Head buckets, blood drainage all across the nation. No more billionaires, no more plutes, that's the solution. Come on down to Chop Mart to get with the revolution. Chopping, slicing, heads are rolling, everyone dies. We got pitchforks, torches, and guillotine supplies. Chop Mart, 1789 Skagsport Way South, Central Woolley, Washington, USA, 98284.
Okay, Tom Hansen. He is alive. He is still with us. He expresses part of his life on Facebook, where he is a fireworks enthusiast. He's definitely got the fireworks connect going. Lots of stuff of him with his giant stashes of fireworks and blowing them up. He also has a cat that he loves. And I did ask him a couple questions. I asked him about the drug bust, but didn't hear back. And he told me I took the methadone that I piled up at Bailey Boucher and sold it for $4,000 and bought a Chevelle, which sadly I don't have anymore. It was too expensive to fuel and keep running. So once a criminal, always a criminal. You know, he's out of rehab and he's clean, but he's still going to make some money selling a whole damn bunch of methadone. I love it. Now, the one problem that I can find that I have with Tom, after examining his life in this book and knowing a little bit more about him than that, is he's not all gung-ho on needle exchanges. And if you are totally against needle exchanges, that is a right-wing concept. I mean, needle exchanges save lives. And not only that, but if people OD, if they're allowed to use on the premises, there's someone there with some Narcan to save their damn life.
But the needle exchange used to be, you'd bring in 2 needles, used ones, and they'd give you 2 new ones. Bring in 10, you'd get 10. Yeah. Bring a grocery bag full, like I used to do, they'd give you a grocery bag full. Now, they don't require the drug addicts to bring their needles back. So, you know, that's why they're all over the city.
So Tom says, needle exchanges, yes. Giving out 300 per person daily without requiring the addict to return any, I don't think that's good. Addicts need to start participating and taking responsibility for their recovery at some point. Requiring them to return dirty needles is a tiny but good first step. It sends the message that society has rules and you don't get to just do whatever you want. Clean up after yourself. Don't just dump needles everywhere and expect other people to clean up after you.
But they're giving them these little shacks to live in, and they're giving them these things, and it just doesn't quite make sense to me because it's not helping them hit bottom.
Sort of a right-wing approach in a way, Tom. I don't know, but again, great book. Rusty.
The media watchdog.
Rusty, the media watchdog. Mark Lanigan has a new book. He is from Seattle's legendary Screaming Trees. The book is called Sing Backwards and Weep. And he told The Guardian, by 18, he was a compulsive gambler, a fledgling alcoholic, a thief, and a porno fiend. Heroin stopped me dying of alcoholism, says Mark Lanigan, rock's great survivor. That's from April 30th, 2020. God, you can't swing a cat in this town without running into a rock star / heroin addict biography or autobiography. This has been the Doomed Planet Podcast, episode 24, Notorious Seattle Junkies, Tom Hansen. You can find out more at doomedplanet.com. Goodbye.
5, 6, 7, 8. Goodbye. This is the end of the song.
Hello, fans of the Doomed Planet podcast, especially Kay and Geronimo from Anacortes, Washington, a small fishing village. I want to apologize. There is a slight audio problem with this episode. Apparently the cord to my headphones was knocking against the microphone a little bit here and there. I'd also like to thank Skillet. He's dead, but he did the music. We use some of his music on every episode, and also DJ Cat. Okay, be safe out there.